Hello, I'm Sue Stockdale, and welcome to episode 128 of the Access to Inspiration podcast, the show where you can be inspired by people who may be unlike you. Whether it's an athlete or an astronaut, we hope their stories and insights will inspire you to reflect on the world differently. Well, in this opening episode of Series 18, Ricardo Brito shares his journey of burnout and career reinvention. He reflects on the warning signs he ignored and why it's important to pay attention to signals of burnout before reaching a crisis point. Remember, you can read along with a transcription of this episode as you listen on our website at accesstoinspiration.org. So listen in as we delve into Ricardo's journey of self-discovery and how he found a new path forward. Ricardo Brito, welcome to the podcast. It's great to speak to you today.
Hi, Sue. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talk about how burnout helped me to figure out my way in the future.
Well, so maybe just kick off then with taking us to your reality back in 2021. Tell us what you were doing in your career and what was it like that really necessitated a change?
That was not a very positive reality in 2021. So we came out of a year of pandemic. I was working hard in this company for the last 2 years and building a team with the pandemic and all of that. The company was going through a lot of troubles internally. There was a lot of extra hours, a lot of traveling, a lot of things. I was already not satisfied with the tech world in general, but was being exacerbated by then. And I was getting at my end. And one day I was in a mandatory leadership coaching training that was totally out of touch with reality and very tone deaf. And that's the moment where the trainer is shouting at us for middle management. And I just said, I cannot say what I said really loud here, but I just said that and I shut down my laptop and I said, I can't do this anymore. So that was the beginning of February 2021.
Now, that was quite a drastic situation to find yourself in then. One of the things that can sometimes happen to us is we get warning signs as we're going along. And I'm wondering, what were those warning signs and what did you do when you became alert to them?
Well, I became alert too late. That's for starters. I think one should not get to the point that I got because the warning signs were very clear since the beginning. I just decided to ignore them. And I think there is here a connection with which beliefs are you holding that make you even push away those warning signs. I mean, the warning signs started very subtle. You start to get annoyed, start to get a bit frustrated. You start to push it. You start to justify a lot of nonsense things in the hope that this is leading to somewhere. You start picking up fights maybe that you shouldn't be picking up because you really want to make a change. And then I think starts to have the body signs. And I think when you get to the body signs, I couldn't sleep. I would go to bed exhausted and I couldn't sleep. My brain was not off. I would wake up in the middle of the night, just, how I'm going to solve that project, how I'm going to take care of that meeting tomorrow. I would wake up already defeated, but also really stressed. My body was really like, oh, and that escalated. It's food that you eat just to satisfy yourself. It's coping mechanisms that you develop that are not healthy. So all of those were warning signs that I choose to ignore.
So it's fascinating you're describing those, and you mentioned the beliefs that you're holding. What were those beliefs that you were holding at that point, Ricardo?
One was financial. So coming from a very scarcity mindset and getting as far as I got in my career, for my standards was successful for me. I was afraid of losing that. And I think I was afraid of, well, this is the price I have to pay. And this is how the industry is and if I need to stay. So I couldn't see a change because for me, it's just, is it going to be different? Or is this just the normal thing to pay? So I kind of justified this, but it pays well. So financial anxiety was definitely one. The other one was my identity was totally enmeshed with his work. And that's a huge trap because then it's not about the work. It's about how I get validation through work. And since I'm not getting the validation I want and things are not going my way or the organization is dysfunctional and whatnot, then it attacks my identity. And then I'm not fighting for the project. I'm fighting for my own identity and validation. And I think it's not a belief. I mean, it's a construct, right? But those played a huge role for me to, oh, this is not a red flag. This is totally normal.
Well, isn't it amazing that when you're through the other side and reflecting back and making sense, I imagine, of what had happened, it's far easier, of course, later on to get that insight and awareness.
Yes, it is. But it's so hard. I don't know. Why can we not see them when we are? going through them. And I had people alerting me. It's not that I didn't have people like, maybe you're not in the right job. Maybe you're taking this too serious. Maybe you're in a toxic environment. Maybe you're not taking care of yourself. I said, no, the amount of excuses that you create, it's ridiculous.
What you're really turning our conversation onto now, Ricardo, is that resistance to change. I'm wondering from your perspective now, and given you're a coach and no doubt you have coaching clients that come with a resistance to change, how do you support them when they're in that?
It's important that they are not in the denial phase. Because if you are in denial, I think there is resistance and resistance. One thing is like you don't even see that you are being resistant. That's a hard one, right? So I think sometimes you need to show them, are you denying reality? But more often, they are not even working with me because they don't need help. So the part of the resistance to change for me, and I think for the people that I work with, is about what is that serving? What is that protecting? Is it fear? Is this anxiety? This resistance comes from a place of security or insecurity. So addressing the nature of that resistance is the first step to understand how can you let it go. Call it by what it is and figuring out where it comes from. That's the first step to move forward.
So when you were facing all of these challenges and people were giving you well-meaning advice or feedback from the outside, you were reluctant to listen to them because sometimes they all have an agenda, or we imagine that they do.
They all do, even if they are not aware of it. I mean, we all do, right?
Yeah.
We all have a stake in these relationships. But for me, it was crucial. And that's how I also got to find coaching. I've been doing therapy for many years, different kinds of therapy, depending on the phase that I am. So I seek therapy when I was doing my burnout. But coaching was something that happened with my therapist, which was also a coach. And it changed gears, right, during the process. And yeah, it meant the world to me because my parents had a bias, my partner had a bias, my friends had a bias, everybody had an opinion of how I should go about it. And I needed a space to really process this and to be completely unfiltered because people enter too much in solution mode, right? And that's what we coaches, we help to get to solutions, but we don't provide solutions. But everybody else in my life was either an opinion or offer me a solution that I don't want. So coaching and having that neutral space, non-judgmental and really tapping into my knowledge was really crucial.
So there you were, you'd slapped the lid of that laptop down, you'd had enough. How did you move from there to being and doing something different?
It took me a long time to accept where I was. It took me a long time. I think the first thing was I was resisting to change because I was afraid of the questions that I had to answer.
Interesting.
I didn't want to face that never was intentional about my career, that was driven by financial fears, that was driven by something that was not fully intentional. So I didn't want to accept that. So the first step was accepting that. And that implied a lot of long walks in -degrees in Berlin, like a crazy old man. During this period was a lot of experimentation. I had to put myself again in a state of play, which is something that I was not. And the state of play was also to learn two things. One, to do nothing, and to separate my output from my identity. And I think that was very important to do stuff that I enjoy, no matter how it comes out. I started painting again. I did a lot of meatballs and sold to my friends. I was obsessed with that, cooking meatballs, because this allowed me experiment. So I experimented with a lot of potential futures that I could have, and that allowed me to put in a state of play while I was doing my emotional work and trying to find solutions forward.
You're saying is you allowed yourself to have fun, to be in a state of play, as you described, whilst also managing and working through the emotions, the experimentation phase. Sometimes what I observe is people want to immediately jump to, well, if I'm not happy in this job, I'm going to stop that job and take on the next thing because it's the knee-jerk reaction. I'm hearing here you allowed yourself a bit of time.
Yes, and that was so important because a lot of people have this knee-jerk reaction, me included. I just wanted to jump ship. But the problem is, maybe it was a blessing, was that my body couldn't handle it and my mind couldn't handle it. So I had to stop. Bottom line, I didn't want to go back. I wanted something else. So being allowed to experiment and being allowed to explore that and to not jump ship immediately was really important. To the point that I returned to my old job, which everybody around was like, what are you doing? Even the people at my old job, I think nobody expected my return. But I realized, look, the most meaningful thing I want in my life now is getting out of tech. And to get out of tech, and I understood that coaching was the way, I understood that this is not going to be an immediate jump. I need to study, I need to prepare, I need to have experience, and I need to have the financial means and to have a strategy. So I went back. I was about to be a director. I said, I actually know I want to go down. So I became an individual contributor, which was weird for everybody that I was managing, and reduced to 4 days a week, took a pay cut, but that allowed me to make a transition that was not risky, both mentally and emotionally, but also not financially. And I think that's very important in these transitions, that one does things strategically, even when the knee-jerk reaction is, I want another job. And my thinking was, then it's the same as this one, and I need to prove myself I don't have energy for that.
So that must have been quite odd for those who you used to manage to find you coming back in a different position. I know one of the questions that's worth us exploring is the role that identity and ego plays in this process. I think for some, their ego wouldn't be comfortable with them going back at a lower level in an organisation. So how did you address those questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. Although my work was connected to identity, my level was not connected to my own value. For some reason, I always have a bit of an allergy to hierarchies. So myself, I was not in this position, oh, I'm a boss. It didn't do much for my ego. The only thing that allowed me to be a boss or a leader or somebody in some sort of decision-making place is that I can help make decisions and I can make decisions. That's what I like about these levels, but it was not connected to my self-value. And so the relationship I had with my team at that point was very level, to be honest. And I think there in Insight, I always took a coaching approach without really knowing and by far doing it correctly. But the nature of that was there, the essence. So when I got back, I think they found it funny because, it doesn't change much, but now I can even be more silly than I used to be with you. That didn't affect my self-worth. And because I had proven my value and my impact to the rest of the organization, I really didn't care if now I don't have the title. I'm still doing good work.
If you're enjoying this episode, you may also enjoy episode 83, where Brian Sacchetta talked about overcoming anxiety and depression. You'll find more than 120 episodes in our back catalogue on subjects ranging from business and sports to the arts and social change. Just hop on over to accesstoinspiration.org and you'll find them all there. Now back to our guest. So there you were, back in the organisation as an individual contributor, all part of the master plan to then transition into moving into coaching. How did you then make that happen?
I was very diligent. I think I really found a passion, which was coaching. So I really made use of my Fridays and my weekends. And every time I had free after work, I was having practice clients. I was studying as much as I could. I was thinking about business plans. I was planning how I could make financially this transition. After 1 year and a half or something like that, I realized I have a good solid foundation to take the leap. And that's what I did. I prepared myself and started to planting seeds early enough. So when I made the leap, although scary, sure, and uncertain, I was confident that would be possible. And the first year was a bit tough, of course, because first year of running a business, it's never pleasant. It's up and downs. But it helped that I was doing it intentionally and everything was kind of going according to plan.
So when you then became a coach, Ricardo, and you were there for working for yourself, no longer employed, did that have any impact on you?
So many. It's a new confrontation with yourself as identity. Identity plays a role again. Comes back again. But if I would have taken serious my work now as running my own business, as I would running my own career before, I would not have a business and I would be a total mess. Because one, I think I created a lot of resilience. Like having my own business made me face a lot of fears. Look, I have a problem with bureaucracy. I always had, I hate bureaucracy. And in Germany, they have this word, which is like Briefkastangst, which literally means fear of the mailbox. It's a very paper-based country. Believe me, you receive a lot of letters. But as a business, you receive a lot of letters. I'm 37. Back to three years ago, I had to have somebody with me opening the mailbox every day. I'm ashamed to say that, but that's how it runs, the fear. 1 year into my business, I'm like waiting for the mailman. Where's my letters? So this confrontation with yourself and your fears, it's really interesting when you start opening your business and running it, because it's really a mirror of what you do. So it definitely had a huge impact in my financial anxiety, my fears about bureaucracy, and so many things that I didn't believe in myself.
It's wonderful to hear that you moved through those challenges, you were prepared to face those fears in the pursuit of something that you were passionate about. So the type of clients that you have been attracting as a coach, are there particular topics that you specialize in now?
Yeah, I have particular topics, but I think it's always about transition, right? And always about creating a better relationship with work. It's in the background. They all want to create a better relationship with work, and that work serves better their lives. And a lot of people are very high performance, people that dedicated a lot of time to their careers. And now they want something different and something either more meaningful, more balanced. There is a common thread across clients that I've worked with or people that I've worked with, which is it's always about the stories, right? It's always about the narratives that we talk. What's the story that you're telling yourself? How do you see your career? How do you see your skills? And I do a lot of archaeology work in that regard, digging out all of those things, even the experience that you had when you were in the coffee shop at the age of 15. You were learning customer service by then even, or other things. Unlocking all of that knowledge, it does allow people to reinvent themselves, to either apply to new jobs or reposition themselves, even finding new avenues. So it's always about some sort of transition and transformation in their careers while making work for them.
So there's a lot of storytelling involved in what you're saying here, Ricardo. So if we went back to the early days of your story and the first few chapters of the Ricardo Brito book of his life, what did you uncover from your own story and your experiences as a youngster that are informing and helping you now?
For example, although I was always a very hands-on person, right, and I like to draw and I like to get my hands dirty, it took me almost 12 years into my career to understand what I really enjoy is people. Even when I was in art school, I was a lousy artist. I mean, I don't know how I made my way through, but I mean, a lot of storytelling to my teachers, that's for sure. But what I was enjoying was organizing people, organizing groups of people, organizing exhibitions, making people that are great artists, but they were probably not being very effective at doing an event. And I think even running design teams and doing products and working in innovation, although my work was very hands-on, was always the empowering the people, was always working the people. And that's a story that I just realized by looking back that what is the thing that I really enjoy from all of that? It's always working with the people and facilitating some sort of action, which again boils down to why I love coaching.
Well, it's great that using that reflective method and thinking about it as a story can really inform somebody so clearly about the threads that are running through their career and their life that perhaps they've never been aware of before.
Totally. And it's so beautiful to see people looking at when I have this exercise, the career timeline. I must say it's painful. It's a bit dull. Like people go like, this is so much stuff. But when they do it and they look at it, it's like, wow, I did so much. I have so much skills. And they see the red threads. Seeing that smile on their faces, especially when they come with a lot of imposter syndrome and they get there by themselves in a more confident place. I'm even getting a bit of goosebumps because I really love that moment.
I can see that, see the smile on your face when you're talking about this. So with that storytelling analogy still in our minds, Ricardo, if we were looking at the next few chapters of the Ricardo Brito Book of Life, what do you see is going to be ahead in the next few chapters?
Well, look, I like books. I like comic books. I like graphic novels. I like a very assorted randomness of topics. If I need to reply to that question, I would say, let's see what the bookstore has in place and which book I feel to pick up. I think I'm conscious about what I'm building. I want to build a sustainable business where I have a little bit more control over my life and still helping people and continue this work. I don't plan for 5 to 10 years to see how this business grows. I'm really enjoying what I do at the moment. When I go to a bookstore, I scroll around and calls my attention and then I go into that direction. I guess the same might happen into my own story to be seen.
You're reminding me of the All Blacks rugby team. When a new player joins the team, they're given a book and it has all the legacy of the players that have gone before, the history of the team. And then there's blank pages. And the question they're asked is, what are you going to write? How are you going to inform the next chapter of the history of the team? And there's excitement and possibilities. We don't have to have our life or our career mapped out in front of us, but we can enjoy the possibilities of what each page will bring for us.
That's true. That's true. Maybe there is still a bit of fear about which answers I need to give. I'm working on that with my coach.
So turn our attention to the role of inspiration. Given this is the Access to Inspiration podcast, one of the questions I love to ask guests, Ricardo, is what role does inspiration play in their lives, or who or what inspires them? What calls to you or what speaks to you when I ask you that question about inspiration?
So many. Also, coming from an arts background doesn't help. But I think connected to my work, what gives me a lot of inspiration is the people that I work with, I must say. I did not foresee how much I would learn from the people that I work with because their life stories are gateways for realities that maybe I would not have access, or beliefs that I would not have access, and ways of thinking that I didn't know that exist. So there are days that I come out of a session and I go like, wow, just my world was turned upside down and I have a different perspective of different topics, and really informs my personal life and my personal belief system, I must say. So that lately, in the last 2 years, has been quite a big source of inspiration. And seeing people overcome what they set themselves to overcome or to achieve, it inspires me to continue, especially in the hard days. And running a business is not easy. I mean, you went to the Arctic Pole and came back. So we need to have those things to inspire us and to move it forward.
It seems to me, just as you're describing, the experience you get from working with your clients is as much about the stories that they're sharing with you as the people themselves.
Yes, it's stories all the way. Maybe it's because I grew up in 3 kitchens. There was a lot of storytelling in the kitchens, as you might imagine. But maybe it's just since a young kid that is like, oh, I love story. Tell me more.
It is such an important idea. How wisdom gets passed from generation to generation very often is through storytelling.
Yeah. And I think we oversee that, right? I think we oversee that this is really a mechanism that builds cultures in the end.
And that, as you quite rightly said, from your own perspective, is exactly the same ethos here we have at this podcast, is through telling the stories of people that we may not normally come across, we can learn from them, we can be inspired by them. One point I'd like to pick up on, going back earlier, Ricardo, was that you got yourself into a place of burnout and there were warning signs along the way. So I'm imagining you're running your life differently now. So I'm wondering, do you have hobbies? How do you relax? How do you make sure that, given you're in charge of your own destiny now and you're the employer, how do you make sure that you don't burn out again?
That's a very good question. So for starters, I think one of the misconceptions about burnout is also the extra work and also the overwork. But for most part, it's a lot of doing things that are meaningless and you don't see the point of doing them. So I can safely say that I work much more nowadays than I used to work before. But at the end of the day, I'm empowered, I'm energized, even if I'm tired, because I know what I'm contributing to and I know it makes sense. So I think on a more philosophical level, there's that. Surrounding with people that also help me to put boundaries. My partner is excellent on that, for example, and also my friends. And taking care of myself. Today is a good example. I have a very busy week this week, but I recently joined the gym, which is something that I never did in my 37 years of existence. And today would have been a typical day. It's like, no, I have way too much stuff to do and I cannot do this. And no, I really made sure, even if I was grumpy at 6:30 a.m. and I said, no, you go to the gym because this is a non-negotiable. You need to take care of your body and give priority, and then you do whatever you need to do. So it's also conditioning myself of this is good for me, even if I don't want to do it. It's like eat your veggies. So that's one thing. And through the day, I try to have mini breaks. One of my favorite things lately is half an hour. I put my headphones after lunch. I put some drone music and some sleeping mask and I snore for half an hour and then I come back to life. So it's incorporated in my daily life.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that you're changing how you approach things to make sure that you're invigorated and don't burn out again. Finally, if you were to offer just one piece of advice to our listeners to ensure that people don't get to a stage of burnout.
Keep checking yourself. I think that's one of the first steps, is that keep checking where you are. Try to understand if you are running towards something or running away from something. This can be running away from the red flags, running away from the excuses. But are you running towards something that you want? So I think pay attention to where you are, pay attention to your feelings, pay attention how intentional these steps are, if they are at all, and if they are getting you to where you want. And I think it's very easy to shove under the carpet all of these signs until you hit the wall. From time to time, checking with yourself before it's too late, because when you want that change, it's going to be so late and you are so tired that you need to recover, you need to figure out what's next. It's like medicine. the better medicine is preventive medicine, not healing. So prevent your career.
Wise advice, Ricardo. Thank you so much for that. And if people want to find out more about you and the work that you do, how might they do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn and on Instagram, so you can find me either there. And I release a newsletter called Burning Thoughts every second week. This is where I make use of my fantastic illustration skills that my parents paid for. So if you also like cartoons and coaching, that's the two come together. And if I can make an offer, I created a career storytelling kit. It's a free kit where people can analyze their career stories and have a couple of canvas to really reflect where they are and where they want to go. And I have a webinar where people can also learn about those things. It's all free on my website. I will put the link in your comments.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds fantastic. It's been really interesting and invigorating to speak to you today, Ricardo. I'm so glad that our story ended well. There was no cliffhanger at the end. And I wish you well as your career and your coaching business moves forward.
Thank you so much. I really had a lovely time with you. Thank you for the nice conversation.
Well, I hope you found my conversation with Ricardo stimulating, and it gave you some ideas of how to avoid burnout. And remember, this podcast is a free to listen to podcast, but it's not free to make. If you enjoyed it, then show your appreciation and buy me a coffee. That means just click on the Buy Me a Coffee link on the show notes to make a small donation, and I can enjoy that coffee when producing the next episode. Your support really encourages us to continue producing quality audio content for our listeners. And also, if you've not read our impact report we published recently, I recommend you do that too. You'll find a link on the website, and it will tell you how this podcast is positively impacting listeners, guests, and the wider community. Next week, I'll be talking to Dana Frank, a Seattle-based entrepreneur, about building a legacy through investing in real estate. I hope you can join us then.